Welcome to the PA is In, the show created by PAs for PAs, where codependency with your supervising physician is a thing of the past, optimal team practice is the future, and physician associate has taken the place of physician assistant as the professional title of choice. I'm Tracy Bingaman, and I'm obsessed with redefining what success as a PA looks like and what it feels like. Here you'll find the mindset shifts, systems, and processes I use to escape healthcare burnout and integrate my work into my life. Work-life balance is a myth, and an integrated life where you thrive professionally, not a balancing act, is the goal here. My mission is to help you to grow into a unicorn PA who loves their job, has abundant energy, time to spare, and work-optional financial freedom. The PA is in. Welcome back to another episode of The PA is In. Today's guest is PA Laura Sweatman. Laura is a PA who practiced clinically for a few years before making the transition to becoming an MSL. Questions about non-clinical work are very often fielded in this line of work, and it's hard to know exactly how to bridge that gap between clinical practice and finding a non-clinical role as an MSL. I am so excited to welcome Laura so she can share all about her journey and how she made this transition. Without further ado, here she is, PA Laura Sweatman. Laura, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Tracy, for having me.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Yeah, so I am a physician assistant, but I am also a medical science liaison for a biopharmaceutical company. And before I get more into that, I do have to put in a little disclaimer saying that the views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by me are solely that of my own and do not reflect the views, opinions, policies, or position of my company, Ardelyx. So with that out of the way, I'll get into what a medical science liaison is, and we'll kind of get into more of how I got here. But basically what a medical science liaison is a liaison in between a healthcare provider or KOLs or key opinion leaders and for biopharmaceutical company. And the MSL is a key role that has been created in order to gather insights from KOLs and healthcare providers, but also to help understand, gaps in knowledge in a particular therapeutic area, or to help disseminate the clinical data that may be continually published by a pharmaceutical company. And then, again, is out there to gather insights on that data. So that's what I do.
Which is cool. And I think also puzzling to people who are at the bedside taking care of patients every day. So tell us a little bit about this transition. How long did you work clinically, and how did you make this jump from bedside medicine to working in industry and being this sort of liaison between the industry and the clinician that you used to be?
Yep, good question. I graduated PA school in 2019, and from there, I kind of just took the first job that came across my emails, and that happened to be a job in gastroenterology in the city that I wanted to live in, which was DC. And I worked mostly in general GI, but also did hepatology. And I practiced there for about 2.5 years before I wanted to try a different therapeutic area, a different specialty. So I ended up moving to Denver because I found a role working in sleep medicine. That was under the umbrella of pulmonology within this pulmonary institution or pulmonary focused institution. And so I also had a role on the team that managed ALS care for those patients. It was in a multidisciplinary clinic. But then I also had a foot in research during my time as a PA. And this will bring me back to how I got the job as an MSL as well. I had a role in patient recruitment for various clinical studies that both of these institutions were involved in. But then I also had a role in clinical trial assessments, patient assessments for various trials that were going on, or research research studies that were being conducted at those facilities as well. And so that kind of brings me to my transition to a non-clinical role. About 4 years after graduating PA school, I ended up landing a role as a medical science liaison for a biopharmaceutical company. And I've now been with them for about a year and a half.
As someone who is a decade further into their career than you are, that feels pretty early to me that you made this jump with, 4 years of clinical experience in two different specialties. Did you feel ready to make this transition, which is definitely a loaded question for many, but what helped you feel like you were ready? And if not, what did you need to get, to do to feel ready to make this switch?
Yeah. So when I was first considering a role outside of clinical medicine, it was really a path that seemed quite unpaved, at least from my perspective. It's not something that you're taught in PA school, right? You're taught to just be a clinician, a bedside clinician. You're in the clinic treating patients. You're not taught what those other roles are that you're qualified to do. You're right. It was very early when I decided that I wanted to transition into something else. But it was also pretty early on that I realized that I didn't want to practice clinically forever. I did love, that patient contact and hearing those success stories from patients that I was able to help throughout my time as a PA. But I really wanted something more. I wanted to make more of an impact. And so as an MSL, you're impacting not only those providers, but the patient panels that those providers have. And I wanted also an opportunity to advance in my career, and I just didn't see a path for myself. There are opportunities as PAs, as you know, but I wanted more. So I wanted more of a trajectory to get into a leadership role, and do more with my career as a PA.
And was that a fluke? Was this like, oh, you just, had a company you were working with? Like, what were the logistics of actually making this transition from being a clinician doing research to then going, into industry where you're working for one of those companies?
Yeah. So once I decided that I was considering a non-clinical role, that actually led me to you, Tracy, because I knew that you had this business in helping PAs understand their full value and their full potential, and working towards a greater, work-life balance, and understanding what they want out of their career. And so I remember I scheduled a call with you. We met, albeit briefly, but I kind of explained to you my interest in this non-clinical role. I wasn't exactly sure what that was at the moment. I knew that, industry was an option, but I was also considering, health tech, or really, I just wanted to know what those options were out there. And so you mentioned to me that you knew of someone who could help me, who was in a non-clinical role, to understand what those are out there. And if it's okay with you, can I mention her name? Yeah. So Rachel Jurgensen, you referred me to her, and she has this program helping PAs to understand those non-clinical roles that PAs are qualified to do. And so while I had this kind of inkling of interest and curiosity in the MSL role, or maybe even other roles, within industry, I wanted to understand what those roles were, and to truly understand, if I'm jumping into something, is this going to be the right role for me? So understanding what are the roles out there, and then how can I tailor my resume, how can I position myself to land a role in a non-clinical setting. And so through her program, I was able to tailor that resume, revise it so that it contained those keywords in order to land an industry role. I was able to understand the different roles that had, that I could transfer my skills as a PA. And then I also learned to really leverage my connections to network and to actually utilize LinkedIn to its fullest potential. So I ended up reaching out to other people on LinkedIn, and mainly those were PAs and NPs who were in non-clinical roles, mainly MSL, because I was mostly curious about that. I had interacted with MSLs and pharmaceutical reps, sales reps throughout my career as a PA, and so I was quite familiar with what they did. But I wanted to truly understand, why did they make the jump, and are there similarities in how I experienced in my experience as well, and then what I wanted out of my career. And so the more people I spoke to, the more I understood that MSL was the right role for me, and then I really wanted to make the jump. And so I don't think it was a fluke. It actually took me 9 months to get into the role after I started applying. But it helped me really learn a lot, and it helped me truly understand how my skills were applicable and how to best position myself to attain a role like this. And so what I think actually, helped me land my first role is that networking and that reaching out through LinkedIn. What I did is I actually reached out to another MSL on this team, and it was really just to gather some information, an informational interview on, the team culture and things like that, and wanted to understand, his position, how he got there, and, if he thought that it would be basically worth applying to the role. And I then told him kind of, where I was and what I was thinking, and that I was thinking of applying to the role. And he then offered, a referral at the end. And so then I submitted my application. I hadn't heard back for about a week or so. And I thought, I was like, I know I'm perfect for this role. This is, a therapeutic area I have a lot of experience in, and I know I can do well in this role. They even mention NP and PA specifically in the job description. I'm going to reach out to that hiring manager on LinkedIn and just let her know that I am perfect for this role. And so I did just that, told her I applied, told her why I thought I was great for the role. And the next day I got an interview. And then from there I followed along the interview process. And I think my personality matched what they were looking for. My skills matched what they were looking for. And my presentation skills really stood up to what they were looking for as well.
I really appreciate your transparency with that, because I think a lot of people are like, well, I applied once and then magically, and that is not a good model to follow. It sounds like you were really strategic and intentional about first researching whether or not this was something that you wanted to do. And then once you identify, yes, I want to make this move, here's the strategy. We are, as healthcare professionals across the board, underutilizing LinkedIn. Other industries are using it like gangbusters. They are using it for connections, super common in business and corporate America. But for some reason in healthcare, we are slow to adapt to that. So I appreciate you calling that out and saying, hey, this is how I connected with this person. I got this referral. So that is the way that we're going to land some of these positions. I would love it if you would share what your day-to-day is like. So the person listening to this who's been seeing patients in clinic for 4 years or 14 years or 40 years knows what clinicians do day in and day out. What do MSLs do? Are you in meetings all day? What does this look like?
Yeah, it's important for providers and PAs who are looking to make the transition to know what they're getting themselves into, right? And I think a lot of people may make this mistake when they are applying to this role and when they are aspiring MSLs. They think that their day is going to be filled up with medical information requests, providers wanting to, understand more about the drug. They have all these questions and things like that, but that's just not the case, at least, where I'm at. It's a lot of being an entrepreneur. So you're reaching out proactively to speak to the top leaders in the field to understand their insights. So some of the core activities that MSLs are doing day to day is those KOL meetings, but it's on us to set those up a lot of the time. And so what we're doing is we're reaching out to the wave makers in the field. So the people who are giving presentations at conferences, who are speakers, who are publishing research on that particular area. Those who are essentially influential within that area, we want to speak to them and understand what kind of insights they have that could potentially shift our strategy as a company in one way or another. And we want to understand what insights they have related to our data as well. But then on top of that, we also do have meetings internally. So we have meetings, with, other members of our medical affairs team. If there's any projects that we're doing, cross-functionally with other team members that, we're taking care of those as well. We're also attending or supporting medical conferences that are not only national, but also regional or local. And making sure we're staying up to date on new clinical data is important as well. And so we're constantly, reading publications in that particular area. We're making sure that we're up to date on our own publications and understanding the message that we're trying to get across there. So a lot of this comes down to, and this is where it also differs from the clinical setting, is making sure that, given the autonomous nature of this role, you're self-scheduling a lot. So you're in charge of your own schedule. And that brings me back to the idea that you're an entrepreneur in this role, right? So you are the CEO of your own territory, and whatever schedule you set, that's up to you. But that also means there's lots of flexibility in the role too. So you're able to schedule around things that are unmovable, whether that's in your personal life or work life. You're able to make that schedule look like how you want it, as long as you're kind of prioritizing as well and making sure that you're meeting the needs that the company has as well. But with that being said, there is travel as well. And so every MSL has a certain territory that they're in charge of. And that can be as small as one city and as big as, even half the country. Mine isn't quite that big, but it does involve a lot of travel still. And so I'm away from home. I'm spending the night somewhere away from home, anywhere from 1 to 4 nights a week. It just depends on the week, on the time of year, what may be going on at the moment.
We love a great side hustle here. If you've been looking for a flexible way to earn extra income without picking up more shifts, my friend Bree Retzner has something worth checking out. She's a PA and recruiter working with a telehealth company in a 1099 role, sharing compounded GLP-1s and soon to launch products like hormone replacement therapy. It's not an MLM, simply referring potential customers, and it's free to do. And Bree will teach you exactly how to do it. You can find her email, number to text or call, and the link to sign up in the show notes. I love that reminder that there are pros and cons, because when we are in the trenches of clinical healthcare, it's pretty easy to look around and see industry positions or other things that we honestly don't know that much about and just think the grass has got to be greener. Like, it can't be worse, right, than what we're doing, day to day, taking care of patients in the hospital, in the clinic. Has that been your experience? Is the grass greener? And what are some of those pros and cons as people think about potentially making this transition to MSL?
Yeah, my experience, the grass is greener, I will say overall, but I still look back to clinical practice and there's some things that I miss as well. So let me start with the pros of being an MSL. And the first thing I'm going to say is flexibility. I would say that's probably the greatest pro that I've experienced, is that flexibility in schedule and being able to make my own schedule and the autonomous nature of the role. And then second is the broader impact that you have. So you're supporting many clinicians and helping them make the best clinical decision that they can. And that's also impacting their patient populations as well. So you don't have your own patient panel anymore, but you have the potential to impact many more patients on a much wider scale. And then you're also, continually learning in that cutting edge environment of science. And you're on the forefront of the clinical data that's being published on a daily basis. And so it's really cool to be able to speak to providers and offer that new data and maybe help them connect a few dots as well, and helping them make those clinical decisions. Of course, we're never telling them what they should be doing. So you're helping them connect the dots sometimes and filling a data gap or knowledge gap that they may not have in order to help make that clinical decision. And so that part is really cool about being an MSL. Some cons that might arise is travel fatigue. That's one of the things that I've experienced periodically. Time to time, my schedule can be pretty crazy. But again, whose fault is that? That's mine, because I'm in charge of my own schedule. So it's important to strategize appropriately and make sure that your travel is, it's strategic. So you may be in one state one week of the month, and another state another week of the month, and just making sure that you're kind of batching it out like that, in order to best use your time. And then isolation. So it can be quite isolating in the field as an MSL. You see your colleagues mostly virtually. You get to see them, periodically throughout the year at conferences or, internal meetings or such. You get to see them in person, interact there, but it can be lonely sometimes as an MSL, because you don't have your colleague that you can just turn to, right next to you in the clinic anymore and ask them, their advice on a certain, difficult decision or topic, or what whatever it may be. And so that part is difficult as an MSL. It can be as simple as just picking up the phone and calling another colleague if you have a certain question, which is great, but it's just another step. And then you have less of an immediate patient impact, right? And so you don't always hear those success stories of, how you helped a clinician and, connecting the dots in a certain way, and how that may have impacted a patient. Sometimes they tell you, which is great, but not always. And then again, you really need to have a lot of self-discipline and self-direction in this job. And so if you don't have that, you no longer have your schedule laid out for you from 8 to 5 like you did in the clinics. And so again, it requires a lot of self-discipline to schedule that, make your schedule as you should, and still, accomplish the goals that your team has.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you saying this is amazing, and that you have the opportunity to impact so many more patients, exponentially more patients, by impacting the care that those clinicians that you're directly working with are having on those patients, but that it's more indirect, that you are not in the room with that patient who's telling you, hey, my symptoms are so much better, I'm feeling so much better because of XYZ, but rather you are giving that information to the clinician, who's then having that experience where they're changing the way that they're treating the patient based on this data, which is amazing, but just a little removed from you in terms of you're not the one sort of having that conversation with the patient at the bedside, which leads me to one of the things I really want to talk about. As clinicians, we know what we're good at. We know we're good at talking to patients, eliciting a history, diagnosis and plan, med management, follow-up, having some of these hard conversations with them. All of those are within our wheelhouse. We would not feel uncomfortable about doing any of that with any patient at any time. How do we transfer those skills, or how do we know that those skills are transferable? And what can we highlight if people are thinking about making this transition to MSL? Hey, here's what I do and what I'm good at, and here's how that would apply in an MSL position.
Right. PAs have a lot of transferable skills for the MSL role. And it is up to you to be able to communicate that not only on your resume, but in interviews as well. And the number one thing that I would say that PAs have the skills for is that scientific communication. PAs are comfortable discussing complex data, watering it down to not only patients, but their families, other providers. If you're in a specialty, you're making sure you're writing in your note to that primary care provider, listing out your plan and basically backing up why you're doing, why you have a certain treatment plan. And so you're able to water down that complex data to these patients and providers, which is something that MSLs do on a daily basis, right? We're translating that complex data that's out there, not only from our company, but also digesting that data that is being published every day in the field. We're speaking with other key opinion leaders, other providers in the area on that data, and making sure that it's in a way that they can understand, especially if it's something that we're publishing on. And then you're also, you have credibility as another provider. You're able to speak the same language as those clinicians that you're speaking to. So you're seen as a peer, right? You're in the clinic every day with physicians, with PAs, NPs, nurses, all of these different providers. And those people, a lot of them are the ones that you're going to be speaking to as an MSL as well. And so that offers automatic credibility in a lot of cases. You're also constantly, adapting, you're troubleshooting different issues that arise. Sometimes 20 plus times a day, however many patients you may have as and may see on a day-to-day basis as a PA, you're that's also a skill that's necessary as an MSL, because things may happen that you don't expect. You may come across different situations that you didn't, or conversations that you didn't expect, that you didn't plan for, but you need to be adaptable and you need to be able to handle those situations with grace. And PAs, I think, are very good at that. You also work as a team. PAs, I think, have been taught to work well as a team member and to work cross-functionally across those different, with those different clinicians that I listed previously. And so that's something that you're doing as an MSL as well. You're working cross-functionally, not only within medical affairs, but sometimes also with other departments. And then lastly, as a PA, you're focusing on the patient. So at the end of the day, everything that you're doing is making sure that the patient is getting the best care that they can. And you're doing the same thing as an MSL. It may be in a different way. And like you were saying, indirectly, you're impacting these patients. But that's still why we're out there doing what we're doing. Is at the end of the day, we want what's best for the patient. And hopefully what we're doing is help making waves to help, clinicians make the best clinical decision that they can based off of the information that we're able to give them.
Which, as a clinician, you're always trying to do that, right? The best decision, the best diagnosis, the best treatment plan based on the information that you have. And I have had experiences as a clinician where I've learned something, realized something, and then I've thought, oh no, like up until this moment, I wasn't maybe doing that as well, or there's some new data or something that I just learned or just started implementing in my practice. And you look back and you sort of think like, ooh, I was not necessarily doing it wrong, but doing it the best that I could up until the point when I got this information. But then as a clinician, you have to decide, am I going to act on this? How am I going to implement it? How am I going to make this a part of my normal practice? So to be a part of those conversations as the person who's helping that clinician, like have that light bulb moment, understand how something works, understand how to treat a patient better in this way, it's really cool.
Yeah, definitely. And, I think other soft skills that, PAs can have when it comes to the MSL role and can translate are things like, time management. You're making sure that you're in and out of the room with the allotted time that you have. You're also curious. You're constantly learning new information and staying up to date on the clinical guidelines. And that's something that you're doing also as an MSL. And then lastly, I think emotional intelligence is a skill that is really important when it comes to both being a PA and being an MSL. You're making sure that any room that you're in, you're reading the room and that you understand even nonverbal cues that are coming across from whoever you're sitting with. And so these are all things that you can use when it comes to leveraging your skills and leveraging yourself in trying to land an MSL role.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we wrap up here, I want to ask you about something that is a little controversial and very top of mind across the PA profession at this time. I understand that you're pursuing your doctoral degree, and I'm curious if you would share with us a little bit about the process of you deciding to do that, what benefits that provides you in terms of career trajectory, and kind of what that decision-making process looked like for you.
So I decided I wanted to get a doctorate. It was probably when I was applying even for an MSL role. I realized that a lot of these roles do still require a doctorate degree. There are some, and more are considering master's degree, PAs, NPs, RDs, whoever to, be able to apply to some of these roles. But I was I was turned away from some roles because I didn't have the doctorate. Even when I had my foot in the door and had connections at said companies, I was turned away because I didn't have the doctorate. But I wanted to land a role with this master because I knew it was possible. And then I told myself once I landed it and I felt comfortable in the role, then I would pursue the doctorate so that I could be, I had more opportunity for leadership later on, more advancement later on, and was more competitive in industry roles should I find the need to seek a different role in the future. And so once I landed this role, it took about a year for me to truly feel comfortable in the role. And then from there, I started looking at doctorate programs, and I found one that I could complete in a year's time. It's all online, so I can do it in my own time. And I started the program about a semester ago. I'm a semester in, and it's really been amazing. It's really opened up my eyes to all the things that I am, qualified to do as a PA and even more. So it's opened my eyes to leadership opportunities. It's opened my eyes to even advocacy opportunities as a PA, ways that I can get involved in that I never had thought of before. And it's really re-sparked my, belonging in the PA world. And so I think that this is really going to help me, and it's deemed so far to help with skills, even related to the MSL role. So it's been teaching me how to write a research article and even digest them and understand them with a little bit more depth, which is important in my day-to-day role when discussing these kinds of things with clinicians. And so I have a lot of hope for it. I'm enjoying it so far, and I think it's a great thing for people who are considering a role in industry, especially the MSL role, because it is still a requirement for a lot of them.
Do you feel like it will help you with both if you were to change positions at a different company, landing a position at a different company, and also growth sort of like quote unquote up the ladder, or in doing other things at your current organization?
I do. And that's one of the reasons that I also pursued, getting this doctorate, is that I do believe it will help me move laterally if I ever want to someday. Because, like I said, there's still a lot of, positions out there as an MSL. If you read the job description, they require a doctorate. And, if I decide to pursue one of those one day, I want to be, in the lineup to be a candidate for that role. And I want to be given an equal opportunity for that role. And I know that having a master's, and only a master's, I guess, if you will, is sometimes a disadvantage for that. But then in terms of leadership positions too, I've heard of others who I've talked to who have gotten a doctorate. I've heard them even tell me that having a doctorate has opened up doors that they never would have imagined. And I see the types of leadership roles that are in industry and who's in them. And I do see that being predominated by those who have doctorates. And given that this doctorate does also focus on leadership skills, I think that this doctorate is going to help me, one day advance into a leadership position, which is something that I want to do. And it's a reason why I went into the MSL role in the first place, right? I knew that there was a bit more opportunity to advance in this role into more and more leadership focused roles. Whereas I didn't see that same opportunity as a PA, at least where I was at.
Yeah. And as someone who is sort of business minded and sees these things from a return on investment standpoint, it sounds like you approach that in a really logical way. Like, this is going to help me in this way. I understand it's going to be a time and money investment to the tune of a year, and that it fits with my lifestyle during, the season that I'm in. I'm ready and willing to commit this, seeing this ROI, seeing this potential payoff in the next, 3 to 5 years of my career. It seems like that's a really logical way to approach it. I think we get in trouble when we say like, well, everyone else was doing it, so I just decided to get one also. Or like, I know I'm a great student, but when we can make it a reasonable ROI for our life and our career and helping to unlock some of those doors, seems like a great thing to pursue for sure.
Absolutely. I went into it with a specific purpose in mind. And I think that, at least at this point, that's my belief of the doctorate for PAs, is that it is for a specific purpose. And a lot of that leads to leadership, or, if you're in academia, that's of course another conversation. But at least in what I wanted to do and my goals in my career, it seemed to be the logical next step, at least at some point. Now, it has been interesting learning how to balance, these new studies, doing night school essentially, along with, this very demanding job. But I think that also adds to the skills that PAs have in multitasking, and making sure that you're meeting the goals and the priorities of various things, whether that be your work and personal life or various roles within your PA job, or what have you. It speaks to the versatility of PAs, I think, and the potential that we have.
Yeah, I believe there's so much untapped potential, and so many people who are sort of stepping out of the mold that we thought PAs had to fit into. Even as recently as 5 or 10 years ago, we are seeing people branch out and break into fields that were specifically doctors and nurses previously, and getting some of these PAs into those spaces is so unbelievably important. So if there's someone listening and they're like, I need more Laura in my life, where can I go to learn more, follow along? If they want to call you up for one of those informational interviews that you did as you were preparing to pivot to this MSL position, what is the best way for them to do that?
Feel free to find me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active. So feel free to find me on there, message me directly if you want to talk to me and understand a little bit more about my experience. I'm happy to chat. I'm happy to help wherever I can.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experience. This episode is going to be so helpful to so many of our listeners.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, Tracy.
I love any conversation that is really, really down and dirty in the nitty gritty of how to unpack how to get from point A to point B. So if you are listening and you're a clinician and you are wondering, how do I become an MSL? What do they do? What are the pros and cons? And is the grass truly greener on the other side? I hope that this episode answered all of those questions and more. Thank you, as always, for tuning in to another episode of The PA is In. That's all for today. This PA is out. Congratulations. You've just joined an awesome club. By listening to a full episode of The PA is In, you are officially on the Unicorn PA team. Welcome aboard. What most team members do is they subscribe to the podcast because that allows them to automatically get the latest episode of the show. The life of your dreams exists on the other side of taking action. Keep making small shifts and keep getting better. Your life will improve, your career will soar, and you will have the confidence you need to create your own success. I will see you in the next episode. This PA is out.